I call to order this meeting of James City Service Authority Board of Directors for a regular meeting. Good evening, Mr. Powell. Would you please call the roll?
Good evening. Mr. Hippel.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here.
Mr. McGlennon. Here. Mr. Eisenhower.
Here.
Ms. Sadler.
Here. Any presentations for this evening?
No, ma'am.
Any public comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Next is the consent calendar. Minutes adoption, number 1 and number 2, contract award lift station 6-6 erosion control for $123,450.
Move the adoption of the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr.
You can just do a voice
All
vote
in
for
favor?
consent.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Public hearings, number 1, easement abandonment area of 4091 Ironbound Road. Mr. Powell.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this is a fairly small easement abandonment. It's in the courthouse green area. There's no real effect on JCSA. We'll be getting a new water service line there. So staff recommends approval of the easement abandonment.
Okay.
This is a public hearing, so.
So we'll open the public hearing. Do we have any speakers?
No, ma'am.
No? Then we'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I have one question on this. Was this initiated by the surrounding property owner, or was this initiated by JCSA, or what caused this to come forward?
To the best of my knowledge, it was the property owners. It's usually new construction or some redevelopment. I'm not sure exactly what created this particular request.
Okay, so in essence,
some conflict with our utility.
it may allow them to do something now that this would have otherwise prevented them from doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Anyone else? All good. Well, I'll look for a motion.
Motion for approval.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon. Aye. Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye. Next is board considerations.
I'll just mention one thing, and that is that I came home on Sunday afternoon to see a number of trucks and workers from the JCSA at work on a broken water main in the neighborhood in which I reside, and they were just doing a great job in miserable conditions, and I really just want to express my appreciation for all the hard work and knowing that day or night, sun shining or raining or snowing or frogs falling out of the sky, the JCSA workers are there to keep the water flowing.
That's right. And I continually hear great things about folks that are out there working, so please convey our appreciation to them.
I appreciate your comments, and I most certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you just speak for just a moment about the main break in Governor's Land last week and how that was repaired, what happened there?
There was a valve that was leaking. It was at the entrance to Governor's Land, and I believe I've shared this before, but the way that Governor's Land is developed, there's no redundancy. So when there's a break near the entrance to that subdivision or out there on Route 5, if there's a break, it means there's an outage for the entire neighborhood, which is a little over 750 houses. It also affects the club. So it is a significant impact when there's a problem. In this instance, it was a leaky valve. So it wasn't a bad leak, but we needed to if it's not repaired, it becomes worse. So we needed to repair that. Fortunately, we were ultimately able to repair it without turning off the water, so there never was an interruption of service in the community. But that's unusual. Most of the times in those cases, there would be.
Oh, and I just want to say thank you for the work there and the way that you tried to notify. You sent out 2, what'd you call it, alerts?
Everbridge alerts.
Okay, Everbridge alerts. And then I know that you also talked with the HOA and the country club, because that has an impact on food service as well. So thank you for all that.
Anyone else? Good. Board requests and directives?
That's what that was.
Is that what we did that one already? They kind of all rolled together.
Yeah.
General manager's update.
The only thing I will mention is I think you knew it was coming at some point soon, but Mr. Vergakis, our chief water engineer, has submitted his retirement letter. He is retiring January 31st. So there'll be more opportunities to thank him for his many years of excellent service, but I did want to let you know his retirement will be effective January 31st.
Did he specify the year, or can we,
2030. That's fine.
You can't go.
We should be good. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and I believe I have mentioned this previously as well, but he does have an interest in working part-time for the authority, and I do intend to include a part-time position in our fiscal year 21 budget. So effective July 1, my anticipation at this point, unless he changes his mind, is that he will come back on a part-time basis.
Very good. Well, then I'll look for a motion to adjourn till 4 p.m. on November 26, 2019 for a regular meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Adjourn.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Hippel? Here. Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
All present.
Okay, we're going to start with a joint session, and we're going to have the Economic Development Authority call themselves to order so we can have a joint session.
Mr. Johnson, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Meredith?
Here.
Mr. Cagle? Here. Ms. Bledsoe?
Here.
Mr. Stockton? Here. Mr. Turner?
Here.
Mr. Campana?
Here.
Informed?
All right, thank you. All righty, we will start our joint work session with the presentation by Mr. Stevens first, and Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, the members of the board and the EDA board, I want to thank you for your time and attention this afternoon. I do want to start by maybe a little off script of just recognizing Chris Johnson as our permanent economic development director. I've been really pleased with his work over the past 6 months and his time with the county. He has definitely proven his ability and knowledge, and really excited to have. So I just want to say congratulations to Chris as we begin. Chris and I will tag team a bit on this, but at least in starting, we wanted to go over sort of, as we in James City County have used our Economic Development Authority in terms of its original piece, and then we'll get back into some other activities that you've been part of, and then see where we go from there. Talk about the survey a little bit, and then get into some other areas of interest for the EDA. And so there's a state code that provides really a list of powers of the EDA. The ones we've boiled it down to really these three, and I don't intend to get too deep into that, but I do want to share, again, to pursue and comply with the goals and objectives set forth in the comprehensive plan, to advise the Board of Supervisors to the county administrator of any application made by an agent or representative of a prospective facility requesting the authority to issue bonds, and then to advise the governing body of James City County of potential location of the facility. I'm going to move on to the next slide in terms of the mission and talk a little bit where it talks about assist and support the Office of Economic Development. Some of the areas in which you've gone beyond those initial areas that I mentioned were being a landholder and leaseholder, of which you are for a number of facilities or properties within the county, members serving as ambassadors for the county as members of the EDA, whether it's ribbon cutting, community events, serving on other community boards, being those extra eyes and ears in the community for us, and then reporting back concerns or issues that you've heard. Has certainly been past performance of EDA members, and then the oversight of EDA funds and expenditures and money that's either sent from the county or money that is your money to have oversight for in terms of budgeting that and then choosing where to spend those funds in economic development activities for the county. And again, you've supported the business celebration for a number of years and been an LPGA sponsor, amongst other things, along with the county over the years. We just provided names for everybody and then terms appointed, and we want to recognize that Mr. Scott has served and has since tendered his resignation and working to replace him. But for the others, we have one at least very long-serving member and then other terms on there in terms of time with EDA. Just wanted to provide that for the board's information.
Which one does not belong there?
There's one that stands out if you look at that list for sure.
It's good to have variety, Tom. I think.
John, you might have to pass over one of your pewter cups.
And we can talk a little bit more about roles and things to do beyond that, but again, at least for the high level of what roles and responsibilities of EDA, I think that is it. We often, I think on the outside, EDA and OED are probably seen as one and the same, and I think from the outside in the community, they ought to look like they're one and the same, but they are different areas for us. With Office of Economic Development, Chris does report to me, and so the activities of he and his staff really are administered through me, and I won't read the list, but you can see there what they do in terms of moving through that. A big part of his job really goes to the next slide for me of where his time is spent. Regardless of where I've been, we've talked about economic development being relationship-based, and a lot of things happen because of being part of conversations or people knowing the community. And so it's Chris being known in the area, our staff being known, as well as promoting our area to other parts of the state. And so we have a lot of partnerships and areas that we are trying to be involved with and part of that are economic development related. We put this list together. I want to point out at least 4 of them that I think they're all significant, probably the 4 that we spend a significant amount of our time and attention with. One is Virginia Economic Development Partnership over on the far right column, the VEDP, the state organization that is, again, bringing business opportunities offered to us, and we do work with their staff a lot, and we have worked with them an awful lot over the past 6 to 12 months. And again, I think I would expect that to continue as we go forward. We talked about GWP, the Greater Williamsburg Partnership, our local economic development regional entity that is a symbol of York, Williamsburg, and James City in terms of funding. We have now moved that over to the chamber function. I think we'll see some activities there and trying to build off the Chambers brand and larger reach for this year. I think people know where Williamsburg is, and having GWP on a national level, I think, gives us that ability to have that brand recognition and a location in the country of where we are when we're out there promoting it. So that is something that we've reorganized and have in a new place, but certainly something that Chris will be a part of in terms of working with and trying to promote this area. We do have the launch pad that I want to mention. It was launch pad and GWP were connected. We have separated those and moved that into the business incubator over as part of the Business Entrepreneurial Center at the College of William & Mary. So we have our business incubator tied in with the college, and I think that will be a good partnership. And again, we've done some of those things in the past, and we've put it back there. I think that we feel that will be a very good place for it. And again, the three localities, York, Williamsburg, and James City, working to fund that and support that as well. And then the final entity that I wanted to mention was the Eastern Virginia Regional Industrial Facility Authority. RIFA was created about a year ago. It is something that gives us the ability to work regionally, where we could work regionally. We couldn't necessarily share revenues. This allows us to put money into a neighboring jurisdiction's project if they request that assistance, and then receive the taxing benefit on a proportionate share if we want to do that. And so it's not an entity that we have to participate in. At this point, there is no cost, and that's what we sold in the initial approval of the Board of Supervisors a year ago, is that it wouldn't cost the locality until we got into a project, and we wanted that project to be supported by us. At this point, it is still a new organization trying to get its legs under it, and Ms. Bledsoe and Ms. Sadler can probably attest it's a little frustrating to be part of a new organization and birthing it. There's a lot of things we take for granted once an organization is up and running, but there's a lot of excitement around the region with the peninsula entities joining, and then interest from the south side localities to join the RIFA as well. And so the real point of that slide is just to show the partnerships and things that are out there, and where Chris and his staff spend an awful lot of time to be known, so that James City County is known, and also to make sure that we know what's going on within the economic development world in the Southside Peninsula and statewide region. So I do want to turn it over to John for just a minute for, I guess, a brief discussion of the survey, and then we'll see if you want to go beyond sort of the talking points of the survey. And
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. The survey, which was conducted, earlier this year at the request of the board, was intended to be a starting point for conversations for all of us in the room, from administration to the board to DDA to our staff in economic development. The starting point to helping us identify what our economic development needs, challenges, and priorities happen to be. And just a good snapshot in time, given the transition that's occurred over the last year or so, for us all to take a nice step back and see where we are individually as boards and organizations and collectively. Again, this is not meant to be any sort of right answer, wrong answer, or report card, just to provide us with a starting point for discussions here and going forward. Beyond the board and the EDA, 6 members of executive staff were in the response. We had 16 responses total, 8 questions. I'll just run through them. Certainly, if there's any questions anyone has, I'd be happy to stop, or at the end, if we want to save it to that point, before turning the floor over to our EDA chair for discussion of EDA issues and items. The first question was on our ideal economic target. 11 of the 16 responses, so the overwhelming majority fell into targeting industrial and manufacturing, with large retail and small retail both come in a close second. Service industries being third. In terms of a preferred wage for businesses that we're looking to attract, again, probably to the surprise of no one in the room, 75% above the county's prevailing average wage was the overwhelming favorite, again, with 11 out of the 16 responses. The county's prevailing average wage is just about $38,700. So beyond the type of industry, the wage that we are seeking, preferred employment size, again, corresponding with the first 2 answers, should not be a surprise that we're targeting businesses that are a little bit more established, that have 26 to 99 employees. That's not to say that any project that comes in through our office, comes to our attention, regardless of their size, doesn't get an equal amount of attention. This is just meant to say if we had our preference and then the size and type of industry that we're going after to attract, it would be in the industrial established companies that pay a significantly higher than our county average wage. The fourth question dealt with what our greatest challenges are, or what we all identified as our greatest challenges going forward. The largest number of responses to that question fell into the category of attracting a younger workforce. were mostly divided on housing issues. There was a pronounced notation for the lack of economic diversity, with some of the other responses being protecting natural resources and community character being seen as less likely of a challenge going forward. Our fifth question dealt with what our top economic development priorities for the county should be over the next 3 to 5 years. This is where we can see on this chart that the responses tended to be a pretty wide cross-section. There is 5 responses that total over 80% of those, and anywhere from business retention and expansion to recruitment being the top 2 responses, but the next 3 don't trail too far behind with just a single response, in some cases, and 2 responses overall amongst those priorities. So if you take those 5 together, like I said, you have over 80+ % of the responses to that. Our 6th question dealt with what we identified as the greatest, what industry we felt had the greatest expansion potential in the county. We asked respondents to name up to 3, not all included 3, but we had a strong majority that fell into advanced manufacturing and materials, with sports tourism and food and beverage and professional and technical services falling in a close 2 through 4. The good news with that is that of our 3 target sectors, advanced materials and manufacturing and food and beverage, professional technical services are right in line with the GWP study from a few years back, which identified those as the target sectors that were a good fit for the county and for the Waynesburg region in general. Next question I couldn't fit on one slide because there were too many responses. It dealt with our overall perception as a strength and weakness. Well, no response. Fortunately, no responses among the 16 ranked business tax rate as a weakness in the county. The timeliness of administrative review was identified by 7 as a weakness. Perceptions tended to lean more to the neutral, slightly towards the weak category on overall responses. The top 2 weaknesses were perceived as skilled workforce and the lack of quality employees. And the top 2 strengths was the availability of office space and retail space. And the last question was to name the top 5 initiatives in terms of where staff should be directing its time and resources over the next coming years. And again, like the priorities question, a very wide and diverse number of responses. Anyone who happened to respond in some of the categories that garnered, 10, 11, 12% of the vote would say, my vote's there. Overall, everybody's vote is there because it's a pretty evenly distributed wheel, showing us that, attractive recruiting appropriate business prospects and helping retain and expand our existing businesses by percentage. We're the top 2, but providing incentives to recruit new businesses was tied for 2nd. And then we had 3 with developing industrial parks, incentives to help growing businesses and attracting businesses in the area, ranking just behind those. And I think in summation, it's interesting. I think one of the takeaways is that one of our perceived priorities, and that's attracting a younger workforce, also was identified as one of our principal weaknesses. So that is an area that certainly if we are to make that a priority going forward, additional resources are going to have to be identified and made available. Hopefully not to the expense of where we're directing a lot of our other both fiscal and human resources and work effort. But overall, nothing that strikes as a great surprise. Certainly welcome any comments, any questions anybody in the room has. Entertain those at this time.
Questions?
Is now, or should we wait till after Ms. Bledsoe?
But Rob, if you want to go ahead and do your part before we start questions and stuff.
I can do that. That makes sense to me. First of all, thank you to the Board of Supervisors for inviting us here today. We enjoy doing this with you all each year. And on behalf of my fellow EDA members, we want to thank you for the work you all do in our community. You do a lot, so thank you for that. As you heard, the many expectations of the Office of Economic Development, we believe our EDA is poised to assist as needed in many of the things that they are involved in. We have determined that we would like to be perceived as an asset to them and we work at the direction of them, not around them. We basically work for Mr. Johnson. If he needs something, we do whatever we can to help him facilitate that. That's why when we go into the priorities that we're interested in working on, you'll see that there's a common denominator in each one of them based on the survey. We are here today, as I said, to present 3 areas where we believe we can play a supporting role in our partnership with the Office of Economic Development. Before I do that, I would like to tell you all about at least 3 to 4 successes that we've already had because of the facilitation of the partnership of the Office of Economic Development. We successfully sold an EDA asset this year at the James River Commerce Center, so we're very happy about that. And the reason that particular asset being sold is exciting for us, it also has the potential for the business to expand on that property. So it could be a win-win all the way around for the county. In addition to that, thanks to our former EDA member, Robin Carson, and our economic development team member, Kate Sipes, they, with the help of Thomas Nelson Community College and the Williamsburg James City Schools, put together our very first workforce summit. And in that summit, we brought in healthcare providers, and we talked to them about what jobs they had and needed that were going unfilled. And it was very beneficial. We had a good turnout. I think we had up to 50 people show up in the healthcare world. And I personally, and I would assume Ms. Sipes has as well, have heard from organizations that would like us to do the same thing for manufacturing. So I think that hopefully will be on the radar at some point. But I want to emphasize that truly was facilitated by those 2 people. They did a great job, and we just lended a workforce for them to manufacture or put out that summit. In addition to the workforce summit, I will pass around some information at the end of my discussion, and it will show you that EDA members are involved in at least 10 different organizations or activities relating to the EDA. Go Virginia, the RIFA. We had an EDA member that was a member of the Workforce Housing Task Force. They don't just show up once a month for a meeting. They are active within the community. We have a member that's on the tourism board, or not the tourism board, but the sports tourism, correct? So each month when we do get together, we talk about a lot of different things that are going on regionally as well as locally. Again, we do try to keep busy, and we do try to represent the county as best we can, and certainly stay out of trouble so Mr. Johnson's happy with us. Based on the information that Mr. Johnson gave, there's several things that he identified that the Office of Economic Development does on a regular basis. And then when you combine those things with the survey, we basically came up with those 3 things where we think we can provide the most help to the Office of Economic Development and serve the county at the same time. The first one is business recruitment. That was identified in the county in in the survey several different ways. And we think that we can help with that by continuing with our site readiness at the James River Commerce Center. If you all remember, you allocated some funding to us to prepare and move those sites to the highest level possible, 1 to 5 of site readiness. So what we hope to do is utilize the bulk characterization study that has been facilitated through the Office of Economic Development and Virginia Economic Development Partnership. And what that is doing is it's a free survey of all the assets within James City County. And part of those assets are EDA owned. And we will utilize the information that they tell us as to how and what needs to happen to make those parcels as site ready as possible and efficiently. It could not come at a better time because you all have already afforded us the option with the money. We believe that should be a big priority for us because we think that if we can prepare those properties, not only are we looking at business recruitment because businesses will come in and hopefully land on those properties, but we're also looking at business retention in the local area in case somebody needs to expand. They can hopefully place themselves out there, and it meets the criteria that we think is the strongest in the locality, and that being the manufacturing out there. The second one, business retention. This would be done through the EDA in a sense. We're sort of doing it as already, but as ambassadors in the community, as Mr. Johnson said, sort of the eyes and ears out in the local businesses, talking to them. We currently do that at a very cautious level because we can't commit to things. We listen and relay information back to Mr. Johnson. The business retention aspect of this would be geared toward Mr. Johnson really giving us specific direction with the business and saying, do you have time to go visit with this person? Find out, let them know we're happy they're doing business in James City County. We want our businesses to feel valued. It's certainly a priority of the Office of Economic Development. And we have the time as EDA members, some of us, to be able to free up a little bit of time to go do those things for the Office of Economic Development. So I think as business retention goes, being out there listening to businesses, making sure they understand that they're appreciated by the county is very important, and we can certainly help assist with that. And then the third one is workforce development models. As you heard in the survey, there's concern about a fluid pipeline of workers in this area for a number of reasons, as we all know. And we think it would be beneficial for the EDA to use some of the expertise that sits around our table every month to look at different EDA models, only models, research them, and then present what we find to you all to see if there's something out there that you are interested in, and then you can do with that as you wish after that. Whether we're still involved in the process or not is fine, one way or the other. But we do feel strongly, we've already got a pretty good model in place with the Chef's Go program, which I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with, that was created by, again, former EDA member Raleigh Carson with Ms. Sipes as well. And our EDA had supported it for a year or so financially. It's a great model. What it does is it engages the business owners that will receive the workforce. They have to be part of the program. And in this particular model, it is the food and beverage world. There's data out there in the Georgia Quick Start workforce development program that says basically that model can be gauged toward any industry. You just have to have commitments from various parties in your locality to make it happen. The Quick Start program does it for free through their technical colleges, and it's the best in the nation. It is ranked #1. We think that it's worth looking into, as well as presenting more information on Chef's Go. And there's plenty of things that the state of Virginia does as well that you all may or may not be familiar with, but we would like to at least have the opportunity to put that information together for you so that we're at least having a good dialogue about what we need to do with workforce development. These are the three things that we think, as I said, we can be most effective and helpful to the Office of Economic Development. Depending on what you decide today, if you say, these are great, press on, we will then go to our retreat in December, and we will develop a strategy on how to address all of those. So it's very important to us to receive your direction so that when we meet in December, we know what you need us to do. And then we'll come back next year and hopefully have some really good stuff to tell you about what we've done. So I'm ready for any questions as well.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
I would, if you're ready, we'll open it up for discussion. Would you
Sure.
start?
Thank you. I've liked the workforce development piece a lot. I think it's something that's out there. I think it's something that we've been talking about a lot in this town. So I really like some more information on that. And any way we can partner up with other community partners would be great. So for me, I hope that that is something you will discuss in your December retreat. I do appreciate the work with business retention, and because I know that's very important. Businesses like for people to stop in, and even as they're getting their feet off the ground, for more so than when can we cut your ribbon? Like, what can we do? How can we help? Or is there a roadblock that we not looking, for you all to move that roadblock, but going to Chris, who definitely has the nice piece that Chris is bringing to this, of course, is the role that he filled for us with the business piece for so long to try to help with those roadblocks. So I appreciate any ambassador work that you're doing that way. The one thing that I'd like to talk about a little bit was the small retails piece, because retail is sort of, well, I mean, but you're dealing with more well-known, places, and maybe you can speak a little bit to what's happening out at your establishment. And is small retail something that we should be going after? I'm worried. I think Party City maybe is leaving, which is, and people are going to be yelling about the empty space, but we can't make a company go into that space. I mean, we've been lucky in the Belk Shopping Center that Ben's has gone there. Colonial Williamsburg wanted a coffee shop. That worked out for us, but we don't have we can't make somebody go into a spot. So I just wanted to see either the chair or Chris or something, just talk a little bit about retail and where you think that's going, if you wouldn't mind. For me.
I think it may be appropriate if Ms. Meredith or Mr. Campana, given their expertise in the retail sector, have any thoughts and comments on that.
I would just say in general, we understand that retail, there's attrition. Attrition has happened for forever, for 30 years. Brands come and go. There is certainly, opportunity for new stores to open, and we've seen that.
Okay.
And we've seen a different look at what the community needs are, because you're meeting both the customer need, the community need, and finding the right fit and the interest in that as well. And we're looking into opportunities, I think, as a whole, and trying to understand in that business recruitment, what is that model, and looking towards other communities is one of the best ways to do so, and how it would it fit into ours. But it's basically attrition. It's going to happen, and they've got to make a certain volume. And some store and companies have overbuilt, and in their overbuilding in their product, they need to downsize.
So you have frequent churn, I guess, but you don't stay vacant very long, do you? When that's the case?
There's just always an opportunity for some new stores, and we've tried when a national tenant isn't available because of the timing. We look to just recently we've brought in several local tenants. Williamsburg Bazaar just opened. We just welcomed them. We just welcomed King of Clubs came into the center. Virginia Gourmet came into the center. And so, which is interesting because it offers a new product that's local, a local product. It offers the opportunity for entrepreneurs in Williamsburg Bazaar to expand and test the market, and an incubator as such.
Okay, so you're still seeing some growth in retail. So when something closes, something else is coming in.
Right, and I think it's good to work, I think, with the incubator aspect of what we're already doing as a community to see really where they're seeing the opportunity as well.
So, Ms. Larson, so what you might be looking for, if I'm hearing this correctly, is possibly some, and this is something that we could easily discuss in our retreat, looking at trends in retail. What are other communities seeing? And I think the attrition part's very important. We're so lucky to have Ms. Meredith she's general manager, as you know, of the Prime Outlet, so she knows exactly what she's talking about. Is that close to what you're looking for?
Yeah, I'd really like to have that kind of information.
Okay. And Mr. Campana, do you have anything else?
Retail is a difficult animal to kind of tackle and sit down with. Reason being is online. I see it all the time from my perspective in the commercial real estate world. Right now, if you're retail and you're a small shop, you're having a hard time competing with the larger boys. What we're doing mainly is backfilling small retail with service-oriented. Everyone needs a haircut. You can't get a haircut online. Trying to retain the small mom-and-pop shops are difficult. Do I have a fix for it? I wish. If I did, I'd be sitting at a much larger table somewhere, I'm sure. But we're going to find it. If it's out there, I'm sure we'll be able to report back to you.
One of the examples I use, though, is to try to counter that is service retail. So you take a business like Ace Peninsula Hardware, a very successful business that does a great job of competing with large box and even online. And most of us find ourselves at one of their stores on Saturday or Sunday. But it's all because they know their customer, they're service oriented. So they found a niche market that's different than going to a big box retail or going to Amazon.
Every bit.
Finding that customer or that business that's going to be successful, I think, is where you're trying to find the kind of mom and pops that work.
Just do your best to try to find yourself at the one on Route 5.
That's where I am usually.
Yes. Great. And then if you can't find it there, go to the city.
Tractor supply.
Until I need the chainsaw sharpened, then I have to.
That's right. I know. I have you to go there too. So.
Do we have any other questions about the three priorities? Are you done, Ms. Larson?
I am. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'd say, Ms. Bledsoe, that first of all, I think that the idea of going out and actively soliciting opinions and concerns from current businesses in the community is a great idea. I encourage you to do that. As I looked at the results, it's a little bit frustrating because I think, what we see is, on the one hand, attitudes about what ought to be our priorities, and on the other hand, where people are saying they expect to see us thriving. So, for instance, I think we recognize service positions are pretty well established, and that we don't do a lot of active recruiting of small retail. We want to help them succeed when they decide to come here, but it's really more a decision about whether there's right market here. Yet it's something, we also say we want to see happening. I always get frustrated with the sense that there's a concern about regulation by our Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors, because what I see in the community generally is that when somebody comes from outside and works with our staff, they generally will let us know that this has been a really easy experience compared to a lot of other communities in which they may operate. There's a lot of, we want to do everything here. And I really do think that if the EDA and the OED want to be successful, it really is going to require saying, yes, we're going to try to do everything, but we're really going to emphasize certain aspects of what we are about.
Which is what you're exactly right,
Yeah.
which is why we've honed in on those three things. because
Right.
There's joint and
I guess I'm also thinking about it in terms of the kinds of sectors and targets that we're pointing to. Again, I think these are fine and very good. But I would say one other thing, and that's on the workforce development models. I'd encourage you to be in contact with the Greater Peninsula Workforce Consortium because they're doing exactly the same thing. I sit on that board, and they have been visiting their equivalent organization in southeastern Connecticut recently, and that organization has developed a multi-million-dollar budget and is doing very interesting and different kinds of workforce development. We have a challenge with workforce development that, you need a workforce to develop. And, as much as you might want to see that workforce, there are going to be broader dynamics that are going to make that more challenging.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting to note that, we've been a high growth community, but our growth has been not so much among people who are seeking employment. People who finish their employment, right? And so the challenge is to find the folks who can support their desires for services and the like. City of Richmond's grown by 9% in the last 9 years. That makes it a fast-growing community, and it is a reversal of trends that have been going on. And it tells you about what young people are looking for nowadays. They're looking for transit. They're looking for amenities.
Close by.
That's right. And so, I don't know how much we can paddle against that very strong current and be successful. I do think that there are some things we ought to be looking at, and among the things in terms of workforce development, we were sitting in the JCSA meeting just a little bit ago and heard about one of our very skilled top-level employees who's getting ready to retire, and it reminds us constantly of the technical skills that we are lacking, and we're not the only utility in Hampton Roads that's lacking that kind of expertise. And so maybe thinking about trying to become a center of excellence in development of those technical skills that are utilized in construction, infrastructure maintenance, and the like. We have a lot of folks in this area who have been involved in construction over the years who maybe are not as fully employed in that as they once were, where there may be some opportunities for them to transition into training the next generation of folks who can work on some of those problems and work with younger people who maybe don't have the intention of going on to a college degree or a professional degree of one kind or another after college. Just some thoughts.
I think those are excellent. Mr. Turner, just so you know, we have been out in the community a little bit with the workforce development. Do you want to just briefly talk about what you've been doing with Thomas Nelson?
Yeah, so Thomas Nelson, I think earlier it was mentioned, and Ms. Sipes is a big part of the workforce development initiatives that are going on in the healthcare industry. And those initiatives go beyond, I guess the participants in those initiatives include James City County Schools. So part of solving the workforce development problem is not just the community college level, but it's the types of course offerings that we have in the school system. And the school system's been an active participant there, and I think we're going to have some tremendous results there. But Thomas Nelson wants to go beyond that initiative. So some of the initiatives that you're talking about around construction and technical services, they want to figure out how to either create a facility here or transport folks down to the facility in Hampton where they've got the Workforce Center for Excellence. So I think some of those discussions are underway. There's a recognition that that there's an issue, a need among our business community. I think one of the things that we've got to do is find out from the business community exactly what skills they're looking for. So that's some of the work that we're going to continue to do and that's part of the whole business retention strategy is in addition to what can the county do to help you, what are the other problems you're facing and how can we address some of those issues. And I come at this from a background of, so my day job is community and economic development, although most of it takes place in other places in the country. So in terms of seeing successful models, I get to see the models of how people are doing things elsewhere and hopefully apply some of those here with the local EDA.
Hopefully, yeah.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up? The president of Thomas Nelson Williamsburg, well, president period, is leaving. Right. So has there been any discussions about with their board about the importance? Do you feel fairly confident that will continue to be
between Ms. English and Dr. Devers?
That's the president now.
I think he's laid a good platform.
Okay.
And foundation. Everything in the meetings that I've attended, this is very important to them. Right. They recognize this trend.
Okay, great.
So thank you, Mr. Turner.
And keep in mind, they've got their own set of issues that they're trying to deal with from a financial standpoint. Right. And candidly, workforce development is a revenue stream for them. So there's ways that we can have a symbiotic relationship there.
I would just like to thank the EDA for, number one, being here today, but also as liaison from the board to the EDA, I've just seen such great strides that over the past year or so, and I appreciate Ms. Bledsoe gathering everyone together to put these ideas together so we can get some direct input to you and from you so that we can put a rubber stamp on some things for clear direction so that you guys know you've told us what you're willing and able to do, and we'd like to support you in any way we can. But I just wanted to thank everyone. I wanted to thank Chris and everyone who put the survey together, because I think it gave us something to be able to put eyes on and get our brains wrapped around of what we're looking at and our successes. And I think we've been very successful in areas, and we obviously have challenges in others, and gives us clear idea of what we need to do to be even more successful. So I just, from my perspective, just wanted to say thank you, and I think you all are doing a wonderful job representing James City County. And I mean, you're volunteers, so you put a lot of time and effort in, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to our meetings.
As a business owner for 30 plus years in James City County, you see a lot of the things you're hitting right here. I know our new businesses that come to James City County, whether they're born and raised here or whether they're moving into the community, it's awful hard for them to get plugged in because they don't know how to get plugged in. Mm-hmm. They're working hard to keep their business going, keep things moving in a forward direction, and that's all their energy they can possibly put out and make a living in order to keep things moving, in order to, where do I find people? How do I find people? Where do I find the work I need? Where do I find this? And it's very tough on a company when they're just starting out, trying to figure all these things out. Maybe something we can work on as far as new companies starting up. And then, I know when I decided to go into carpentry and all that, I went to Votech and studied there in Votech, and then came to work for Colonial Williamsburg for a while, and then went on worked for David Nice for a little while, and then worked in my own business and started my own business. And and trying to figure that out, almost if we had something that if somebody was wanting to start a business, here's how you would start a business in construction or manufacturing or even sales or bakery products, or how would you start a business? What would I need to do? I need money. I started mine with $215 in the bank. That's all I had. And that's what I started my company with. Now I got $216. But
we're not going to use your model then.
No, don't. But and where do our new men and women out there find how to start their business, how to grow their business, what do they need in place? There's things we have, but it's not a roadmap. Okay, I can use part of this, I can use part of that. And in the construction business, it's a lot better now than it was then. At that time, you didn't share anything. Yeah. Now we start sharing a little bit more. We find out we can do more by sharing than we ever could by keeping this one little secret of how to build this certain wall compared to that certain roof, or how you develop this, and that's why. So we found slowly, in the longer you're in business too, Tom can tell you, the longer you're in business, the more you're starting to see where, hey, these make a difference, these friendships and these relationships in business. So how do we take the business community and start bringing in more relationship oriented? If it's in construction or if it's in business as a whole, banking and everything, this is what you need to do. And some of us went to school for business, some of us didn't. It's hard knocks. And so how do you get there? And most entrepreneurs are, hard knocks type people. And their biggest thing is, how do they go from being a technical side of it to being a business leader? And that's a hard jump. That's where it kills them, is trying to go, okay, I got to put my hammers and saws away, and I've got to work on the business. Right. How do you develop that entrepreneurial myth? How do you develop that into, the new, and even the companies that are existing? Here's some things, and sometimes a smaller group setting of contractors or bakers or hairdressers or any, a lot of them feel like they're on their own. They kind of feel like they're, I'm trying to figure this out. I know a few people to do, but you kind of feel like you're by yourself, and you don't want to reach out because you don't want somebody to think, well, you don't know what you're doing, even though you do know what you're doing, but you don't know how to get to this next level. And I think that's what a lot of our businesses try to figure out as they go along. And it's eating up a lot of valuable time that they could be building their business with some advisors or something like that could help them, maybe retirees that could, like SCORE does, and help them along. But a lot of people won't get involved in that thing, and I watch this, and it's a great program. But I think a lot of them won't get involved because they think, well, I should know that. Well, you can't know everything.
Right.
You got to go, I know this and I need help on that.
We actually have a great, and I'll make this brief, but we have a great story about SCORE. We had an EDA member that was in the community visiting with businesses, and one particular business was really struggling and thought they were going to have to close their doors. And he said, well, have you talked to SCORE? Have they come in and counseled with you? And she said, no, I don't know who they are. He set them up. Not only did they figure out where the problem was, but the business is still up and running and doing fine. And it was as simple as that person hearing it, coming to the OED and saying, who do we refer them to?
Yep.
What can we do to help them? And sure enough, it worked. It's not always an OED fix.
Right.
And I think what you're talking about is business connectivity. And there's lots of great organizations that, because of our networking as a community, that we can connect people with.
Right.
And I think that that's something that as ambassadors, and certainly with Chris's guidance, we can be effective at.
Yep.
I think you're exactly right.
Almost like the old switchboard operators,
Yeah.
plugging them in the right
I
direction.
remember those.
Yep.
I have a cell phone.
You got one of those?
Do you have anything else, Mr. Whipple?
That's it.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I will try to sum up a little bit here and then see where we want to go with this, any further discussion. First of all, I want to thank everybody for participation in the survey. When we sat and started crunching it and looking at it, a couple of things struck me right off of that. Number one was that there was not any significant difference in responses between three different groups, the EDA, the board, and the executive leadership team. So, I was concerned that, first of all, we might have varying differences of opinion, that were at odds with each other. The second thing I found was that it was remarkably focused on, there's a lot of things out there we need to be doing, but this is, if you got limited resources, this is where we probably would get the biggest bang for the buck. And I think that's where it came through in this whole thing. And so I appreciate the detail on the survey. I'll tell you that my experience has been over my time on the board is that the board has been a little removed from this, and that I think that EDA and OED have sometimes operated independently and not necessarily talk to each other very well. I don't think that's the case right now. I think that you guys are operating very well together, and I think one of the things we wanted to do as a board and to make this work session productive was to try to be able to provide a little bit of guidance. Now, the problem for us is how do we provide guidance without getting into the weeds? We want to provide general guidance and let staff and you guys sort out the details. But I think that this survey summary sort of gives you an overall plan of where it might be helpful to put some of the emphasis when you have the opportunity. Doesn't mean you're not going to deal with those things that come up that are opportunities that don't fall into that. You take what you can, get everything we can. But I think if I were going to give any guidance, I'd tell you a couple of things. Number one is that I think that diversifying our economic base has got to be number one. We are at risk otherwise of becoming a bedroom community, and that then puts the burden on the property taxes of our residents. And I think that diversifying that economic base and growing it is what helps us in the long run. We have industries here. We have certain, we are definitely into the tourism. We're into some service industries and things. A lot of retail. Doesn't mean that we ignore that. But what we want to do is if we have an opportunity to recruit something other than just that, that's what we should try to do to get that, broaden that base so that we have a better base to grow our tax base. I would say that when you tackle any of your projects, I would, number one, say you need to take a look at are your resources adequate for the task. We've already had discussions about manpower, and Scott can talk to you a little bit about what he might have in the way of ideas, but I want to make sure that we have the proper people, the proper resources to do the job. We can't expect you to go do the job if we don't give you the tools. So that's coming up in this budget cycle, so that's one thing I think that needs to be considered. And then I would say the third thing for me would be to continue an atmosphere of involvement between the board and EDA and staff on all this. And Robert and I had this discussion. We think that the relationship should be a lot more like the Planning Commission relationship with planning and us. We talk to them quite often. Of course, we get their product to us for review on a much more regular basis. But I think that the opportunity for you to go off and to your retreat and to focus on what your plans are and what you would like to accomplish, short-term, medium-term, long-term, and then to come back on a recurring basis, a regular basis, and keep us in the loop. I was telling Scott earlier, there were times when I was on the board, we'd go 2 or 3 years, and I'd say, well, I wonder if they're working on something. I wonder if something's going to happen. We didn't have a clue, and I don't think that's the way to do business. I think we need to know. So that's my take on it. I would open it up for any other discussion, because I think what we want to do at the end here is to make sure that we've given you some, what we think we think you'd like to do, we'd like you to do in terms of fairly broad guidance that, without really getting into the weeds, that you can work with.
I would add one more thing as far as we look at bringing people into the workforce and that sort of thing. Don't forget the county. We need good qualified people. Mm-hmm. As was stated earlier with the service authority, but the county in general. And we're looking at ways, how do we develop a workforce to replace the ones that are retiring?
Right.
And it comes in groups, hire a bunch, and in 30 years from now, that bunch is retiring. And so we need to, keep that going. So that's something that, we can use your help as well, as far as helping us develop a succession plan, as far as getting new people into the county and promoting, this business as well, the county business.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, Doug Powell is a great person to talk to, because JCSA, and he can share with you some of the frustration that he's had, and he's lost some people that
to return.
And we lost someone to a company that provided a $35,000 signing bonus.
Wow.
We can't necessarily compete with that.
Right.
But there's nobody else that does that job. And in fact, that person was offering to come back and help us out on top of doing their other job. So there's positions that there's just nobody trained for.
Wild party with that $35,000, huh?
Pardon?
Yeah, it was a wild party with that $35,000.
Yeah.
More than all of us make.
Anyway, combined, I'm not sure we make that much.
That's what I'm saying.
As far as giving direction, the 3 things that you've offered here, is that something, because they're fairly general, is that something that you can take as direction, these things themselves?
Yes.
And work with Mr. Johnson? Is everybody on the same page with these 3 particular items?
And in full disclosure, we actually had pretty hefty discussions on all 3 of those, with things that we think are good starting points. For the sake of time today, we didn't bring any of that or go into it. But we definitely have ideas and plans for those things. I did hear a little bit about, I think we can investigate attrition. I think that's really important. Mr. Hipple with his connectivity, business connectivity, they're all different things that we will incorporate into our discussion. He's jumping out at me. I took good notes, though. Certainly what Mr. Eisenhower said that I think kind of sums the whole thing up. Diversify the economic base. That's obviously a goal that OED's had forever. And we certainly would do anything we can to help with that. Resources is an ongoing issue that OED talks with, and that's probably not involving us, but we can certainly be an asset, I hope. That's the goal. And I am very pleased with the dialogue that we continue to have with the board. And it is appreciated. It's helped us immensely. The site readiness funds that you gave us and trusted us with it. And if you want to hand those out, Lynn, or pass those out around. Those are just for you all. Attached with that, those are the committees that I was telling you about that the different EDA members are on. But I also want you to see the site readiness spreadsheet and where the money is going at this point in time and the things that are being worked on at this point in time to prepare James River Commerce Center. I would imagine staff is on a holding position until the bulk characterization study is done, but the staff has done an amazing job getting quotes, things like that, identifying problems, issues on the particular properties. So that definitely will be something that we will continue to work on. Your input today was really helpful in the sense of how deeper we could dive on some of these issues, and it is truly appreciated.
I apologize. I do have one question, and that's in regards to GWP. Can you explain to me now how it's going to work now that it's gone under the, I guess, the Business Council of the Alliance? You're still going to serve on that?
Yes.
Okay, so give me some idea about what your role will be now that it's over there.
I'm a board member. Just another board member, but I will say the move is a good one. The role of GWP really hasn't changed. It's just it being housed in a place that makes a little more sense with resources. They have access to the Business Council's resources. Terry Benez is outstanding with the Business Council. She's the director of it. She works directly with the new hire, the new director of GWP. And GWP will continue to gather projects, information, promote the 3 localities regionally with direction and support and the things that they may not have had 100% of before. Not for lack of anybody not trying, it's just a matter of the communication just wasn't working right. But I think it's a perfect landing spot, Launchpad as well. Perfect spot for it. It's going to do incredibly well. And those are great tools for us. We, as a historic triangle, we have unbelievable tools at our disposal between Greater Williamsburg Partnership, Launchpad, and all 3 EDAs. And we're actively working with the other 3 EDAs on the project now. And GWP will also be involved in that. So I think it's in a good place, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
It's a very good place. All right.
I had one other question on this your little outline for the properties there. And you indicated that you think that the next step that you have to get over is this bulk study. That what I'm interested in is finding out after when you get to a point where you're comfortable, you guys in OED, to have a better feel for the board as to how long you think it would take to what kind of stages is it? Going to be stage 1, 2, 3, 4? You know, what kind of resources? What kind of time frame are we looking at? Because I think this is fairly important to follow through on with all of this, and I want to make sure that we are sort of kept in the loop as to you know how that's progressing. Because right now it looks like we've only spent a little bit of money. We sold one piece of property.
Right.
We spent a little bit of money, but there's a lot of things that have to happen that haven't happened yet. And so my question is, I really don't have a feel for how that's going to, how you might think that might be translated. Of course, I know that's all subject to change up in the air.
I think part of it is staff time because it's such a small shop.
Yep.
Other things take priority.
Okay.
In fairness to them. And now we are really waiting for the bulk characterization study because it's just going to be an immense opportunity for the locality. And then it's up to Mr. Johnson and how he designates, prioritizes these things because we can't do it without them, obviously.
Okay.
I think we've been doing pretty well given the amount of time they have. That's really the biggest obstacle.
Okay.
So, but we will definitely keep working on it.
All right.
And I would like to ask, would you like something like a quarterly update?
That would be
Before the
helpful.
board?
That would be helpful if we could do something like that. Now, I would think you normally do your retreat in December.
Yes.
All right, and then one of the things I would like to do is to have like we have an annual joint meeting with the Planning Commission. I want to formalize that we have an annual joint meeting with you guys. So I think that's going to be something we need to do to follow up on this. But in the interim, in between those, I wouldn't necessarily say at any schedule, but when you get to the point where you think it's time to give us an update or things that are going along, it would be perfectly appropriate to set up a work session where maybe have 15, 20 minutes or something to get an update from you on progress.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Very
Are you everybody? And I think we're all in the consensus that we're okay with your three points there. So if that's all we need.
Okay.
Mr. Stevens?
I think that's all we need, sir.
Mr. Johnson, you happy?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break when we clear the. Yes, you can run. order. And our next, we're moving down to number 3 on our schedule, voter registrar space needs for the fall of 2020 election. Ms. Boone and Ms. Mormon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We're here today to provide an update on the space needs for the voter registration and elections office. The need is driven by a change in legislation. House Bill 2790 will allow for absentee voting in person beginning 45 days prior to an election, and no excuse absentee voting 7 days prior to the election, starting with the 2020 presidential election. The projected turnout is expected to increase from an average of 10% to 60%. Historically, the average turnout per day for a presidential election is approximately 250, and the most in one day has been 407 voters. Estimated daily voters prior to a presidential election could increase from 800 to 200 or 2,500 per day, with the possibility of up to 3,100 per day. Starting back in July, Mr. Stevens and I met with the Director of Elections and a few of her board members to discuss what impacts this unfunded mandate will have. We identified concerns with her current space and location. So obviously insufficient parking. If you've all been to Palmer Lane, it is tight. And then if you've been inside, there's a lack of lobby space and queuing space for people to get in and out of the weather and just to wait to vote, and a lack of customer service workstations. So her counter is restricted on how many people can be serviced. So facing these challenges, we started the discussion of alternative locations. We took the following items into consideration as we evaluated alternative spaces. So minimizing voter confusion on location. So if you think back, voter registration used to be in the old building F, which was the tiny little building that used to be the old Public Works building. Not that I've been here a few years. They then moved to a trailer on site. Then they went to building B. Then they moved to building E. And now they are down at Palmer. So, they've moved several times, and just, people do get confused of where they're at. So we also we needed a place with sufficient parking, adequate lobby and queuing area, somewhat centrally located, adequate storage, training facility, on a water route, considered the cost, and of course, building and cybersecurity is something else we took into consideration. So before you is a matrix just on the options we explored. So we explored the government complex, particularly Building F. It met some of the criteria. The cost was particularly, low. But it didn't. Storage, training, and the office may not be co-located, and the training area would not be available for 6 consecutive weeks. Is when Diana provides training, the ability to have the machines and everything set up so she's not tearing things down and putting them up all the time. Saves time and makes her more efficient. We looked into a modular building, maybe setting it out at War Hill. We looked at leasing, and we looked at purchase. As when I talked to a contractor about the modular building, he said we would be, better off probably purchasing than a continued long lease. With that was significant costs, site design, infrastructure for utilities. And then we also looked at a temporary space at Thomas Nelson Community College. We didn't look at a space. We asked if they had any space available. We thought, it met some of the criteria of parking and all that, but unfortunately they didn't have anything at that time that they could offer us. And then we looked at temporary space at the law enforcement center. Would have potential impact on law enforcement activity And unfortunately, the parking isn't great over at the LEC, so folks would have to come across Opportunity Way. And then we looked at the recreation center, and it did also meet some of the criteria. Maybe a low impact, but a temporary location. Long-term leasing of existing storefront, well, we could look for it to meet all of the needs that we had. That is a significant cost, an ongoing cost. So the consensus of the group was to, let's continue to look at other places. We also looked at short-term leasing. It met some of the criteria. It was a moderate cost, but we struggled with storage and training, and the office may not be co-located, and we agreed that this really wasn't a good option. So after discussion, Mr. Stevens and I met with Ms. Mormon and 2 of her board members yesterday to review these options. The recommendation is that the voter registrar should remain in her current location for the fall 2020 election, with use of one of the James City County Recreation Center meeting rooms for the actual 7-day no excuse voting. Ms. Mormon believes that the 7-day period will be extended to 21 to 45 days in the near future. We talked about continuing having this discussion, give us some more time to really look at more in depth at the options to ensure that we're not rushing into something. So we're meeting her needs. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, well, one question is, so right, as it stands right now, fall of 2020, 7 days.
Correct.
If there were to be any changes instituted by the General Assembly in January, February timeframe, that could go into effect July?
Fall of 2020. They were looking, I was talking to the senator that actually put the bill forward, that is the one that passed, and there were actually 2 very similar bills that passed through the House and the Senate. And the senator said that he is fully intending on changing that 7 days to 21 or 45 and having it go into effect for the presidential election.
Okay, so
there will be no dry run.
Okay, so in other words, right now we know we're going to have at least 7.
Correct.
We may have as much as up to 45.
That is correct.
And that, so whatever we do now to accommodate the fall of 2020 needs to be able to accommodate that range.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then beyond that, we would then have the opportunity to evaluate more options for a more permanent solution once we knew what we were faced with.
Correct. We will always be facing the possibility of there being a special election, something along those lines, but we've not had a special election for quite some time, knock on wood. But standard, we have them in June and November. But those, the 7 days or the early no excuse absentee voting would go into effect for the presidential, and then it would go for every election there.
Okay.
And but not the presidential primaries next year?
No, sir. We tried for that, and they said that would be too soon to get everybody established for all 133 localities. And they did take that into consideration, and then we tried to go forward for June, and that failed as well. So the compromise was going for the presidential.
Okay.
Oh, I do have the handouts here. You guys had asked in an email for potential stuff or the turnouts, and the numbers that we have are true numbers based on what North Carolina has done, and looking at our numbers based on the 2016 presidential election. And if we do 30% turnout, which would be extremely low, we're looking at having in the neighborhood of about 1,500 a day come through the office. And then if it is on the high side of what North Carolina historically is, every election with the 60%, we're looking at having right in the neighborhood of 3,100 come through the office in an 8-hour time span. If you go and look at the breakdown of the 10-day, 20, 30-day, I did not include the 45-day, but you can kind of extrapolate that out and see what the numbers would be. They would be diluted a bit, but it would be irresponsible of us to not take the largest number into consideration. I continue to say that we're built for Sunday church and not Easter Mass.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are just a number of questions and issues that I'd be interested in knowing about, and I sent you a list of some of those questions earlier. Sorry, I couldn't get them to you earlier than
That's
today,
okay.
but that's when we got the materials. And among the questions that I had, I think you answered. The first one is just that for this year, at this point, we're talking about 7 days of voting for the general election. And those 7 days would be the Saturday before the election and the 7 days preceding that?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, so there'd be 2 Saturdays in there.
Correct.
And that the expectation that you would have is that they would be from 8 to 5?
Yes,
during
sir.
those days? Yeah, and of course, that's a concern from my perspective because that's not consistent with when people can vote on election day. And there are lots of people who are working between 8 and 5, maybe even 6 days a week, or 7 sometimes. Realize that on election day they can hopefully get to vote, or they can vote absentee, or they can still come in during other days. We'll still have other periods?
Yes, we will continue to vote 45 days prior. So we always start in September, and it's often not, people don't realize it, even though we do advertise that it is. It's been 45 days in advance.
Right.
And there are 26 different reasons right now. And Code 1E says that anybody who votes or works outside of their locality or is outside of the locality can vote absentee.
Right.
So we do have people that come and say that they're going to be in the city of Williamsburg that day to meet the needs. But it's,
and 10% would be high for us, right? I mean, we haven't. That's. I guess we've just been getting to that point recently.
correct.
Right.
Our 2018 number actually surpassed our actual turnout for 2016. Our 2018 turnout was 38,951. Whereas the actual turnout in 2016 was 36,298. So we actually surpassed the presidential numbers just because the county continues to grow.
Right, yeah. And when we're thinking about those kinds of numbers, lots of Virginia localities, especially in Northern Virginia, have been far outstripping the percentage of vote being cast early. So obviously, I guess people are more likely to claim one of those exceptions, maybe because they're working in D.C. The commute obviously is a problem for a lot of people, and so forth. But just to understand this, so the one set of rules is going to apply 7 days before the election, but for the other remainder of the 45 days, it's the 26
the reasons. Yes, sir, that is correct. That is why the senator that sponsored wrote the one bill, he has already said he has the full backing and the full push of the ACLU and the NAACP to push this forward. Because he says, why do the people that come in 9 or 10 days have to fill out an application and say why they have to be gone and disclose that information when they can come in 1 or 2 days later and just vote, which is understandable. I am all for voters being able to cast their ballot. I just would like that it would not have been an unfunded mandate.
Right. So with the number of people that we're talking about during a concentrated period during those days, do we, what kind of parking problem is going to be at the rec center?
Well, we have the piece of property across the street. So we may have to do something temporary with that space. Maybe we have some of our staff park in a different location to free up as much space as we can. So.
And Mr. McGlynn, we are talking about how do we park more there. I did ride through the rec center. I'm there during the day, just sort of seeing what it looks like. Even today, where it looked pretty busy, there were still 100 spaces in the outer parts of the parking lot that weren't being utilized. And for the voters coming, there will be turnover. So even, 1,500 a day would be pretty taxing. You still have that constant turnover. We haven't proposed shutting down the rec center, so you'd have some competition with users of it. But those are some real problems that we're still figuring out logistics of there or any other county-owned facility, quite frankly, to have that kind of numbers coming and going.
As it is right now during Election Day, that is one of our precincts, and we have approximately 3,500 registered voters in that precinct. and it works. Granted, we have a 13-hour voting day instead of an 8-hour day, so it is considerably more condensed. But we've not had any problems being co-located with the rec center being open. Last presidential, it was closed, but.
What did we do when we used to have 2 precincts there? Did we close the rec center?
No, sir.
Because
I remember, a lot of complaints.
Well, I don't remember parking being that much of a problem even when we had 2 precincts there. Because that was it was my B and D precincts both. And, you know, the biggest problem was confusion as to which room you went into.
Right.
But as far as parking, it seemed like it was turnover, but it seemed like it always seemed to work.
We have a fantastic police department, and they help the flow going.
Yeah. And I always see these pictures of lines of people in North Carolina or other states, and I kind of wonder, well, I've never waited in a line that long on election day. Why would I stand for 2 hours in a line like that? But obviously, people have different views on that. But what would we anticipate to be the kind of weight that people might have in a situation like this? If we looked at the high kind of.
As far as I see it, the weight is directly proportional or proportionate to the amount of poll books that we have, the amount of voting booths that we have. We have the power to control the line length and the weight that we have. The more poll books that you put in the precinct, the average locality puts between 2 and 5 laptops. In our larger precincts, we put in 7. And if we see that there's an additional need, Virginia election law says that we must have 1 voting booth per 425 voters. And we do that total calculation for each precinct. And then we go on and add an additional 5 voting booths. So in the event of a line getting back up, we can immediately go and add in more voting booths. Also, we plan on having additional voting machine. Code right now says that you have to have 1 machine per 4,000 voters. And we absolutely intend on having 2 machines in the facility so that they can continue to be processed. And by
machine, you mean the scanner?
Yes, sir. Okay. The optical scanner. Right. And then we would have spares in the backup in the event that those should go down. We have we've got 4 machine technicians on standby.
Well, I don't envy you the task here. I think it's great that we provide more opportunities, and before long, I'm sure we'll be under a lot of pressure. And I think it would make a lot of sense to do things like they do in some other states. In Nevada, you go into a convenience store anywhere in the state that's a voting booth, and they have a state poll book, a computerized statewide poll book, and you can vote in your precinct anywhere you are. That's a very different kind of style.
I wish we could do that for our military overseas.
Yeah. But I guess I wanted to raise one other question, and it may be something that our discussion about legislative programming ties into. You indicated that, can you explain a little bit more to me about, so if we're going to have, say, somewhere between 40 and 60% of votes being cast absentee, the way that I've normally seen that is that they are reported as central absentee precinct, right? More or less. And therefore, they're not reported, at least initially, with their actual precinct. Are they ever?
They are not reported that way. However, that's not to say that I can't. That report is available just 3 lines below the report that I publish, and that is published by the state for voter turnout. The state actually, because we do have the central absentee precinct, that all ballots do count, regardless of how close the race is. It is a central absentee precinct, and then that gives the total amount. However, we do have the report that I go through pretty much daily or once a week, and I go through and look at that, and that does give the breakdown of every single precinct, the turnout of how many registered voters still have their ballots outstanding, and how many have come in to vote in person on machine, and it is significantly broken down.
But then are the votes, when the votes are actually counted,
yes, sir,
are they then assigned to the precinct in which that voter was is there any kind of ability to produce that report? So in other words, if you're thinking about a precinct, and I realize it's not necessarily what you would be concerned about, but somebody who is running for office might be concerned about the question of, how did that precinct as a whole actually vote? If 60% of those folks are being reported as central absentee and not with the precinct, you don't really know.
Well, we have probably 15 to 20 different reports that are available to us. We have it that it is broken down. We can see how if the precincts are broken down, if they request that that they come in by mail, or they request that they voted in person. We do have that breakdown. As far as the actual turnouts of how they actually voted, we have that broken down by precinct. In some ways, we have it broken down by district. For instance, Roberts District, we would see how how central absentee voted for Roberts District.
Right.
It's not broken down by Roberts A, B, C, or D, but then we do have it broken down by congressional district. I can also run the reports on, I believe, House and Senate district.
Right, but you wouldn't be able to see it in terms of how the individual precinct actually voted as a whole.
No, sir.
Right. So that's what I'm thinking about in terms of something for the legislative program.
Yeah.
That the concern with that is voter privacy to an extent.
Sure, if it's a small enough precinct and there's only a handful of people who are voting that way.
Which we have that.
Yeah.
Thank you to the lines being drawn on different mapping software than what we use.
Yes, right, yeah.
So there is a compromise. There's a possible compromise in voter privacy at some point.
Yeah, that may have just been an anomalous situation because of a mid-decade redistricting, and hopefully that won't happen every decade.
I will be optimistic in 2021.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for answering my questions about all this. And
thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
So, I'm not loving this idea just because we're displacing, right? We're going to displace some people that use those meeting rooms at the rec center.
So we've reached out already to Parks and Recreation to try to reserve that room. So yes.
Okay. But I mean, I don't know what the alternative. I mean, I was just sitting here trying to think like, what else is there? Is James Blair? Is there any space over there in the annex? But then that opens up a whole nother issue. And plus, I think it's in the city of Williamsburg, so that opens up a huge issue. Yeah. I mean, I guess y'all have looked at a lot of places.
We had even entertained looking at, for instance, having a couple of satellite offices at the EOC, for instance. And then we said, where in the world is the parking? We wouldn't have any place for the lines or anything to flow through the EOC. They're already jam-packed as it is. And then they would have to cross over the busy road if they parked in the overflow farmers market. And we have not a lot, but we do have voters that are that don't have stable footing, and not having a paved parking lot is not a very good thing for voters. And then also going to the extreme of the south end of the county, the Abram Frank Center, that also compromises the school functioning there at James River Elementary, and that gets into a lot of other questions of student safety, etc. And I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No. So I guess the bigger question is, moving forward, what's the solution? And then as you look at office space for yourself, how do you not, the office that you're operating in right now probably works fine 300 days a year or whatever, but do you just plan for, having a much larger office with most of it not utilized most of the year? Because really, I mean, moving all that equipment, that can't be good for the equipment.
They're very delicate now with the LED screens.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really want to have to be doing this at every election. You probably want and need a permanent type of fix. Right. Where that equipment can stay, and what does that look like? Does it look like 2 offices? And what does that do to voter confusion? Because I do think you did hit the nail on it. I mean, people still come here, I think, and so now now you got to go to the rec center. So, and it's not, it's nothing that we're cooking up. It's just space. So I guess you're having an even further discussion about long term.
Yeah, so Diana decided she wanted a little breather before we dive back into it in a month or so.
Yeah, because she's getting close to an election.
Right.
Yeah.
So we just thought that we would give her a few weeks, get through this, and then we'll bring on an architect and talk about space needs and how she functions and all those things that she needs.
Yeah, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then the space issue we talked about, reserving those rooms is one thing for 7 days. For 21 days or 45 days is
another thing.
That's a significant impact.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot of. That's the other issue. There's not a lot of space around here.
The Hippel building.
That's what I was going to mention. I was going to mention it goes right back to what I've been saying.
To hold community events, I mean, it's tough.
Yep.
And so you take something like that offline for 45 days. It's impacting Girl Scouts and different civic organizations and other things.
And then ballot security. I mean, what will you do every day? Take all that stuff back?
That would be one.
Right.
I'm sure that there would be a closet that would be dedicated just for a lock that would be in my possession, and one other staff member. That currently is what we do when we go into our 2-person lockdown mode after the election, and it's just myself and one other person in the office that has the key to that vault, and we would be doing something similar to that as well on election day, or I'm sorry, for that time frame of voting, and just have it quarantined as much as absolutely possible. Currently, we have everything under motion detector, under camera, lock, etc. But it's the Wild West right now, and we have no minimum standards set forth by the state. So it's kind of 133 localities deciding their own fate, if you will. And
have you looked at Legacy Hall?
That would take a significant amount of activities, and there's no parking.
No parking. Right across the streets.
We have a difficult time. We have a precinct that's located there right now, and there are 1,100 people in that precinct. It's one of our smallest precincts, and we get one of the most amount of complaints for parking with the 1,100.
I believe it.
A new build will have plenty of parking.
Well, I tell you, there is a great deal of our population that is elderly. And, and you are spot on about uneven pavement. I mean, all of that has to be taken into consideration. And, I was laughing today because I was circling before exercise class trying to park closer. And I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem quite right. But, for a lot of reasons, people do like to be closer to the building. And I imagine especially, as I age, that's important to, so, yeah. I mean, you're right. I'm sure there were 100 spaces at the rec center, but if I had to guess where they were in the back 40.
Well, I was even grasping at straws asking, I had sent Scott an email and I said, what about Jamestown Event Park building? Would that be a possibility? And I have been looking everywhere.
Yeah.
And I can imagine driving through the county, getting a feel for everything. And I have this county pretty down pat, and the location.
I would suggest that at the rec center that, if they got one of those rooms, I think one is all you would need really to run your operation of those 3.
I would request the room A so that the kitchen is attached,
right
because we will have to have a staff it's going to inflate the staff. We'll need to be an active staff of about 10 to 15 to process daily.
So room A, but then what I would suggest would be that if you're going to block off parking, you need to block off parking right outside and say, all right, this is for early voting.
You go deal with the people that are going to the rec center.
And all the excess people are
exactly.
That's what we have the police for. You see, exercise from up there.
So what is the costs of this going to be?
That
For
is
the
a very
staff,
good
the
question.
increased staff, I mean, it's 7, and you probably don't know it off, but I'd like to know 7, 21, 45, what the increased cost to the county will be for that.
I'm also on the board of the Voter Registrar Association for Virginia, and I'm an elected board member for them. And we just came out with guidelines to establish what is needed, what the cost would be, et cetera. And that truly just came out a few days ago. And we're in the middle of the election, so I have not really taken time to focus on that. So once I get through the election, get through the quarantine period, and I'm already starting, I'm co-planning the presidential primary right now as well, because we start absentee voting for that in January. But in the midst of that, in my spare time, I am working on
I would like to know that. And I know somebody's going to, other people have a comment. I would like to know what was worked out with the schools for the presidential primary.
2-hour late start.
Okay.
So I do appreciate that they entertained something for us. And I would like for it to have been a full day. I'm working with the PTA, hopefully, and having them get parent volunteers to kind of line the hallways to make sure that the voters get to the right place and don't have access to any other parts of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So I think,
My phone's always open.
as I guess that we're being asked to say is if this is an acceptable one, I think this looks like it's the only game in town for us right now. So
I think we were just trying to make sure the board was aware of some of the challenges that we've been talking through it. I do appreciate Diana and her board members. They've been involved in the process and had lots of discussion with us. And for the short term, I think this is it. But I do think it continues after November, looking for what happens as the years progress and you have more of these early voting situations.
Yeah.
And then figure out how much size you'll need when we put our new building in.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So do you want to go back to the contract award for Patrick's here? All right, we will then move to contract award benefit consulting services, $998,300. Patrick Peak.
Hello, Chairman, members of the board. The Human Resource Department solicited competitive proposals for benefit consulting services. We reviewed 7 proposals. The evaluation committee was comprised of members of the Financial Management Services Department as well as Human Resources. We narrowed the group down. We had interviews with each of the top candidates, and we determined that USI was the most qualified firm to meet our needs at a price of $98,300 per year for the first year of services, and it would give us the option to extend the contract for an additional 4 one-year terms with a 2% cap on any increases. And we recommend adoption of the attached resolution authorizing the award. And we do understand this was added late to the agenda. We're trying to move ahead to have our benefit consultants get us prepared during the budget season for any changes we're going to make to our contracted services for benefits. So we understand that if you need more time to consider, we're prepared to wait until November.
When was the last time that one of the, did we do this we didn't do this last year, did we?
No.
When was the last time we did a benefits consulting?
Approximately 5 years ago, and we've been running on those one-year extensions since that period of time.
Okay.
So we've had benefit consultant services for around 15 years, and our most recent contract with the company MMA, and we've utilized their services for the past 5 years.
Okay.
And how does this contract compare to the expenditures on that one and the range of services?
The range of services, it is night and day for us. I brought my little list in case you were curious. We're going from a regional partner in benefit consulting to a national partner. They provide benefit consulting services for jurisdictions such as Newport News Schools, York County. So they have a lot of local connections. One of the most amazing services they offer we did not see from any of their competitors is a 5-day-a-week, 8-hour-a-day benefit resource center. So if you have a problem with a claim or you have difficulty understanding why you build what you build, you can call the consultants and they will research and come back to you for an answer. So they become more of a partner with the Human Resource Department rather than just a consultant.
So that's somebody from your staff is talking with them, not the individual employee.
It can work either way. That's the joy of it. But yes, the most efficient way for us to utilize that service would be for our staff to make that contact so that we understand if there are any permutations that we didn't know were happening within our staff group.
And just to get a sense of the scale here, you're talking about just under $100,000 for this contract, right? And what is the amount of benefit expenditure that we would have in this year? Roughly. I mean, I don't know. I don't expect.
Yeah, I really, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I would estimate. I would be really. This would represent less than 5% of our total benefit expenditures in a year. I do know that much.
Yeah, I'm actually. That's a lot less than 5%.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah, I think we're looking for a motion for this.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Stevens?
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Triple?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All righty. We now next go to appointment of Animal Control Officer, Mr. Kinsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have before you a resolution appointing Ms. Shelby Iyer as an Animal Control Officer for James City County. Recommend that you approve the attached resolution. Happy to answer any questions.
How does that bring our animal control staff? How are we doing in that area?
Defer to the county administrator. I think that makes two.
It does make two.
How many would we like to have?
We had 2.5 in terms of positions, so we've been vacant. We've been vacant the one position for a very long time, so it does bring our full-time staff to 2, which is better. And then a half-time positions beyond that would help to substitute. So I think that would get us to where we say we are fully staffed. Whether that's adequate is something for the chief and I to talk about a little more, but at least it gets them much better than they have been.
Because you do wonder if you made that half position a full-time, if it's needed,
right,
would we be able to fill it that way? So, okay. Thank you. I'll move the resolution.
Okay. We have any other discussion? Nope. We have a motion.
Let's call our roll, sir. Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Ripple?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right. Now, we go to 2020 legislative agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, one each.
I'm sorry.
Okay, good.
All right. Members of the board, what I've passed out to you now are two versions, the same ones basically that I emailed you before, a short version and a long version, and we can talk about those two in a minute. I'd like to go through the direct legislation on the first page and see if that meets your ideals of what we want to do for our 2020 legislation. The first one, 1.1, distribution of online sales tax by physical address. You brought this up in January, your January 22nd meeting in 2019, and it would be a request that the General Assembly require online retailers to distribute sales tax by physical address instead of zip codes, and that would help ensure that each locality receives its proper amount. I do know that there's a good bit of almost horse trading at the end of the year trying to figure out what money goes to which locality. The second one would be this one came from staff to amend a particular section of the Virginia Code to allow special conservators of the peace employed by a locality in the definition of criminal justice agency. Currently, your park rangers in the Parks and Recreation Department are special conservators of the peace. It has come to our attention that they would like to have access to the Visa network. So when they pull somebody over, they can call in and get some of that history of the person that they have in front of them. Currently cannot do that unless you're associated with the police department. And so rather than going through perhaps a big change in putting our park rangers in our police department, this would be an opportunity to see if the General Assembly would amend that definition to allow special conservators of the peace to do so.
And they would still have to abide by you can't just pull license plate up and run it, you have to have purpose and reason.
Yes, sir. They're, as we all know, they're very particular about that.
Yeah, they are.
And they watch that, they edit it, monitor it. And so, yes, we would have the exact same regulations that we would on the police officers. Your third one, 1-3, this came from Mr. McGlennon, amend the Virginia Code to allow localities to prohibit e-cigarette stores from locating within 500 feet of a public school, basically not allow vape shops right next to schools.
So 500 feet, is that is that a thing?
No, sir. I magically came out of my head.
Okay, just because I don't think there's probably any commercial activity within 500 feet of almost any of our schools. So
there's one, maybe one on Richmond Road.
Maybe,
Yeah,
right.
I get to it.
Okay, right, yes, yeah.
Perhaps, but
no orange. But certainly not the high schools, you know.
It admittedly, it was an arbitrary number out of my head. So.
Right. So I guess I'm interested in two things. One is do we currently have the authority to essentially zone out vaping from the county, which I would like to do. But secondly, if it's beyond our ability to do that, then do we have an ability to say within a quarter mile or something like that of schools, something where, you know, you are really talking about the likely catchment zone for kids coming out of schools.
They can't just walk there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think I'm not comfortable with saying that you have the authority to zone them out. I'm aware of some localities that require special use permits for all such stores. I think that puts you in a very difficult position when you're trying to look at it from a zoning standpoint versus sort of a heart standpoint. How is that really any different than another particular retail establishment when you're going through the analysis that we would require under the zoning ordinance?
It's killing you.
Yeah.
Killing you.
But from a zoning standpoint, you look at traffic and impacts. I think I'd feel more comfortable if we had direct legislation that said, yes, we can do that.
Was there a limit on age for buying?
I think they moved it up.
I think they moved it up to 21.
But 21, like cigarettes.
Right.
So then that would prevent any kids from buying.
Theoretically.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, you can't.
No, that's like everything in life.
Right.
You can always get it if you need it, want it.
So just two questions. One, is there anything that prohibits the sale of cigarettes within X amount of a school?
I'm not aware of such.
Okay. And why would we not want to add that? B, I think I hear you about, but then I would say to the e-cigarette, they are intentionally, or they appear to be, so I don't get sued. Allegedly, with the cherry, and I mean, they don't make cherry. They used to make cherry cigarettes when we were little that you pretended and you ate them. But they intentionally do things. They allegedly intentionally do things to appeal themselves to a younger audience. So that's kind of the rub, I think, with attracting students. But I mean, cigarettes are. They've been causing a lot more deaths for a lot longer time, allegedly, than e-cigarettes. But do you think that's too much of a?
We can always ask.
But what does that do to grandfather clause for people that they're already there?
Yeah, ones that are already there.
True.
Yeah. And you know, you've got the 21, which I'm not into vaping and all that stuff, but you know, you've got the 21 to stop it. Yeah, to regulate it. I would think the legislators would probably look at that and say we got it at 21, so a school child is not gonna. And it may be one of those ones that we put in there that they look at and go, I'm not taking that. You know, doesn't mean we can't put it in there, but likelihood of it passing would be.
Yeah, it would probably be worthwhile having something on the legislative program that we present to the legislators to see if they are hearing about whether there's going to be some kind of statewide action on this matter.
Okay.
But just to let them know that it is an issue of concern.
But what does that do as far as your hemp? Because vaping stores are now trying to, the what is that? Hemp? CBC. So, you know that stuff, huh?
Right.
Just kidding. But
CBD.
CBD.
See?
That says CBD. None of us know it. Good. It says a lot for us. So what is it? You know, some of these stores are starting to put that in with their, you know, e-cigarettes and that sort of thing. So is that another item that, you know, once we go down the road, we need to.
Well, the CBD oil is supposed to have the non
right
piece of the high part of the marijuana.
Not in it.
Not in it, right?
Correct.
That's pretty strictly regulated. The growing of hemp has become a lot more popular in Virginia, and I know that the agriculture department goes and looks at it. They're regulate the level of THC in there, and I think it's less than 0.03%.
Right.
That they have to be. So it's really expanded quite a bit from just a couple hundred acres to several thousands of acres just in 1 year. So I think you're seeing more and more of it.
And
I know we read in the paper where like some vape stores are now selling that primarily, I think, because of the backlash that you're getting from vaping products. So
yeah.
But I mean, it's up to the board. We can leave it on there and see how that fares next month.
Sure.
Okay. A new one that's before you that was not in the email and it came up today is 1.4, and it's amend section 58.13720 of the Virginia Code to allow imposition of license tax on amusement machines that take payment in forms other than coins. Some of you may have heard in the news about games of skill.
Yes, right. Queen.
Yes, Queen, that is now appearing in various bars and whatnot. It's a video game. It's a variation on tic-tac-toe, and it has been found that it involves some skill and is therefore not gambling in Virginia. And it's this one machine that has qualified, and it's Queen Gaming Systems. It's according to them, it's in every locality in Virginia. We're not aware of any in James City County, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. We do have the ability to tax such games, and we have that set up in our county code, but it talks about coin-operated games. And I don't think anything does coin-operated anymore. And so we went and checked the Virginia code, and the Virginia code sections deal with coin-operated amusement games like this. And so I think the time is ripe if they're going around that we eliminate that coin-operated part and perhaps just go, whatever form of money it is, electronic payment or coins or dollar bills or something like that. So that was our thought.
We had a very extensive public opinion survey at our household on this very question of attitudes toward Queen and other skill games as opposed to slot machines.
Yeah, they're strictly video, and then there's some deal where you can just sort of hit the number and you'll play again, or you can hit a ticket and cash out, and then you go take the ticket out and get your money. They become really, really popular in other areas. I talked to our zoning administrator. To the extent that someone would have one or two in an establishment, they're currently only being placed in those establishments that have ABC licenses. One or two in a bar is no real difference to us than one or two golden tee machines or trivia machines. Once you start setting up, as they have tried to do in other localities, a building with nothing but these things in it, we would call that a use, and that would be something that we'd have to figure out whether it's permitted in the zoning ordinance. I don't think it is. So what you'll see if these come around James City County is probably one or two here or there.
So you're asking us just to ask legislators to drop coin-operated.
Correct.
The definition.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And then tonight was Mr. McGlennon's. I wrote that down as a request to have absentee ballots be broken down into precincts versus central absentee.
Yeah, and it could, certainly, I hope that would apply, and I know that there is this issue of privacy that would apply in precincts that have 10 voters or something like that, and maybe one person casts an absentee ballot. You know the difference between the election day vote and the absentee ballot. So it could include something that would, for instance, just say any precinct with more than X number of absentee ballots should have those ballots reported.
It's not like they don't have the information.
Right.
I mean, they have it. It's just a matter of making it formally. And I never understood why they wouldn't account for it, because right now I've got 4 precincts, and at the end of the day, when the election's over, I don't know whether I won that precinct or not, because I don't know how many of the absentees were from that precinct. You see? So, if I've got 120 absentees and 75 or 80 of them are from one precinct, that makes a huge difference. So it's always been a little frustrating if you're trying to follow how your each individual precinct has performed. I just didn't see why they couldn't do it.
Well, and especially we're going to be going up to 40, 50, 60% of the votes being counted, being cast early.
Beforehand.
Yeah. I think the change in early voting and the fact that they would all be under simple absentee, and there could significantly be more than half of them in that category, I think is a compelling argument. So.
Okay, I'll write it up.
Okay.
That's the bulk of your direct legislation. The remainder of the pages are position.
Adam?
Yes, ma'am.
I still want to see something about how long it takes something to be completed. And you don't want to do that.
I will be happy to do that. I think they're going to point back to the references to residential houses that have taken an inordinate amount of time, in some cases decades, to be finished. I think that one of the legislators is going to point to that particular section in the code and say that we can limit something to 3 years to be completed. And have we tried that yet? And we're in that process. I'm more than happy. This is your agenda. I'm happy to put that on there for you.
So we haven't really held it we haven't done our part yet.
That's correct. And planning on, for that particular one, we're planning on filing suit here pretty soon.
Right. And I know that. But maybe, I don't know that that's the only house in James City County, but 20-some plus years, for goodness sakes. I can't imagine, as far as I'm concerned, the people that have lived next door have shown an enormous restraint, because that would drive anybody about batty.
I guess I was having a hard time coming up with something that would be written that's different than what's already in the code. Okay. The code says that the building official can limit a permit to 3 years, and then if not, it's sort of silent and not. It doesn't say what happens if you don't meet the 3 years, but I think it's inherent in there that you're going to go to court, and then a judge figures out what you do.
But what do you have to do in the 3 years that you cannot do substantial completion in that 3 years? From what I was told, you could go and just so long as you made some movement around that, then you would have to be issued another permit because you did something.
There was a clause in there that talked about substantial completion. I think to some extent you're right. Someone could theoretically game the system. This one seems so abnormal, because who goes to 75% of a house and then holds it at 75% for 10 years? It's such a rare case. But it certainly has happened there, and then some.
Well, so let's see where it goes this year. And then now, I could not be, I'm not necessarily saying I'll be back here next year if everything goes okay. But if we'll see how we do on this. If we hear about other, maybe we just don't know. Maybe other people haven't let us know that there's houses that are sitting out there and then can we regroup next legislative program season?
Yes, ma'am. We'll definitely be speaking from a position of better authority next year, because we will have tried, in my mind, we will have exhausted our administrative remedies. Everything that was available to us under the code, we tried, and we either succeeded or failed.
Okay.
And then if we succeed, we might have suggestions on how to make it better without having to go to court. And if we fail, then suggestions on how to change it or a different procedure.
Okay.
But I just don't know how I'm going to effectively argue around that point, that we just haven't done everything.
Okay.
I was wondering if you could look into something for me, please.
Yes, ma'am.
My situation, for example, in front of Stonehouse Elementary, where VDOT repeatedly says, the study says that a stoplight is not warranted. I'm wondering if there's anything legislatively that can be done that says, if you have this X situation going on in front of a school, specifically a school, if that can play any kind of role in a VDOT study.
I'll be happy to look into that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll just jump on to say there was another accident at Route 5 in Centerville today. Somebody was hit from behind and the road was closed down.
Oh,
So, TikTok. I know it's not in front of a school, but, what is the tipping point, for goodness sake?
I know.
So,
I hear you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. If nothing further on direct legislation, you're left with the couple of pages on positions supported. I'll point out there are, most of these are carryovers from multiple years. A relatively new one is 2-1 that came from Mr. Stevens. That's Airport Road, Richmond Road intersection improvements. 2.2 impact fees is really a carryover from last year.
Can I stop with
Yes, sir.
the 2.1? I understand this is a bad intersection, really bad intersection. It's in York County, is that right?
No.
No, it's in
It's on the border. It's on the border.
It's on the border,
Yeah.
okay. Do we know if York is going to?
Yeah, York is, apparently York is taken, they put it on their priority list, to my understanding, but I don't know that you.
I've seen their list, but I can't remember it. I've got it, so we could verify that.
So the only question I have is this legislative agenda? Is it our road requests, or how do we do this because of how do we?
It's not a big booth through transportation through
Would
the
that be
CTV.
legislation?
And it's not the legislation as much,
Right.
but it's through the CTV and moved in that direction. But this is squarely in James City County, just up from it is York County. But that intersection is James City County.
The Jamestown, the Moortown Road, Airport Road intersection. Moortown Road is the boundary between the county and James City County, and that part that runs between the two traffic lights over across the railroad track is all in James City County, and that's where the most congestion is. Although what happens is people back up into York County because they can't get through that intersection on Airport Road. This is one of those that I think it may take some sort of legislative oomph. And the reason for it is that there are so many moving parts. Number one, the railroads are involved. If you're going to do a project here, it's going to be widening. You're going to have to widen across a railroad intersection. That's going to be a lot more difficult.
You got businesses on each side.
And you got businesses on each side.
Right.
You would have to take some from one on one side. I think it can be done without too adversely affecting the business over there. But we looked at it, and when I talked to Rossi about it, he says, yeah, it can be done. He says, but there's the compounding factor is the railroad number, and the other thing is the expense. And I don't know if we don't do something to try to break free a little special project funding. I'm not sure whether we're going to ever get this thing done.
I think you're going to be hard pressed with the limited stop area between the railroad and Richmond Road.
Yeah.
That's going to be our biggest cue to try to prevent and trains coming through.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating this at all, but one solution would be for flow of traffic, not for ease of traffic, but for flow of traffic would be to cut it off at the railroad track and use Moortown Road and come into this each way, come up Bypass Road and come 199 and do away with that intersection on going across the tracks and make that.
You would.
Oh, I know. Yeah, but the thing for flow of traffic and ease of people communicating, it cues them out to go.
Actually, the biggest problem, it doesn't occur, but except one particular time of day. It's about 5 o'clock.
You're right.
And the problem is because there's traffic flow coming, a heavy traffic flow coming down Moortown Road.
Yep.
And what they're doing, and there's a lot of heavy traffic flow coming across Airport Road. And they both come to that traffic light.
Yep.
And the people coming down Moortown make a right turn on red and fill up that queue.
Yep, exactly.
So when the light turns, you can't have no place to move. There were several options that they talked about doing. One was if you put a second full lane all the way across. Now people, if the right lane is right turn only and the left lane is left turn only up there, right now you got one guy who wants to turn left and everybody who wants to turn right is sitting behind him. They can't go anywhere.
Exactly.
If you got the two lanes designated like that, then only the people who are turning left, which are the minority of the traffic, would be backing up in their lane. The right lane could continue to flow with the right turn on red up there. And I think it would completely eliminate that backup. But it requires that second lane from Moortown to Richmond Road, which across the railroad tracks to be able to do it. As a fallback, the other thing on an interim, the cheaper thing to do but it wouldn't solve the problem long term, is to not let people turn right on red off of Moortown. Now, what would that do? It would let people cross maybe from airport a little bit more, but it might back the traffic up on Moortown. So you're trading one backup off for another, because both of those directions are fighting for one lane that can be blocked by somebody turning left. That's the whole crux of it.
Right. And then with that intersection being so tight with the railroad,
yes,
and getting the right of way, which you're not going to get from the railroad, you end up, so if you diverted traffic around that and brought them up on 199 and bypass, I know people go crazy.
No, let me tell you, when I go over to the dog park, I go over that way. When I come back 199. And the reason is because I don't want to get caught in that thing. But I think that's not necessarily the solution to the problem.
You're just trying to avoid it.
I'm just trying to avoid it. I think there is a solution to the problem. I think there is, but it's going to require recontouring of that intersection and then extra lane across. I'd like to see us put something in the,
I guess I'm not convinced that it's going to be successful.
Oh, I'm not either.
Right? But I don't mind this. The main concern I would have is just that we do have other priorities that how do they relate to the legislative program? We typically wouldn't have them in the legislative program. So basically, we're saying this. We recognize this is not going to percolate up.
Well, this is not one we're looking for specific funding. This is one where we're supporting.
Right.
And because this is something I think you're going to find that York County also wants to get. So, and then if you get two counties that are support legislation to try to fix this problem, maybe they can come up with some sort of.
And then our other item would be we're pushing hard in transportation for light rail, and light rail is going to use that section in there as well. So it's going to limit how much access we have for turning lanes and all that, especially as tight as that is right in there. So we've got to think of, and I hate to be the one to, say that, but we've got to think in the future as far as when light rail does come, which we're pushing for. They need X amount of right of way at the railroad to get the regular rails in and the light rail in. And that's coming quicker. It might be quicker than we think. They're really pushing hard to get light rail through here and connect it. So it's a big push for that, and we have to have that right of way, or the railroads have to have that right of way to get that light rail in. So that's another item that may give us not saying we can't do it, but it may be another obstacle we have to try to figure out.
That's a right of way that they would have to expand the width of their thing, probably toward the Moortown roadside, because they don't have it the other way, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't necessarily alter our ability to cross two tracks as opposed to one track. Because right now we're crossing one track. Right down the way, it's two tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So
just something to think about.
Yeah. Okay.
The remainder of the legislation on Part 2 really is a carryover from last year or years past. I'm happy to continue that if you'd like. I did take a stab at doing a short form legislative program, just in case you're interested in something different. We've sort of done the same thing for many, many years, and pulled 2.1 through 2.4, which are, I think, all the ones that we had last year. And then I would probably recommend doing a 2.5 and support VML VACO high growth, which really covers, honestly, covers everything else that's on your list. There's not a whole lot on the long list that's particularly specific to James City County.
I would look at 2.7. If we're going to support anything as far as transportation, I'd rather have the I-64 finished through James City County. I'm going to continue to fight that and get that out of here one way or the other. But I would, like to keep that in the forefront as much as possible, since we've written letters and We've got PDC and TPO and all that position themselves behind it as well.
I'm fine with putting that on a. I would say that I like his short form.
Yeah, me too.
I'm fine with putting 2.7 on here as maybe 2.5, and then maybe adding a 2.6, which says everything by, like he says, VML-VACO. Because if you look at this, all the rest of this stuff is up there. It's always in the VML-VACO.
Yeah. The only thing I would ask, Adam, is on 215, when you're talking about restoring the funding cuts, can we get the amount of money? Can we get the school system should be able to give us that, what are we looking at? What, I think they're still operating at 2009 numbers. So can we get a number so that when, I don't mind having this piece when we meet, but I'd like to be able to have that number.
Okay.
Good thought.
So if you guys are fine, then I'll for your next meeting, which is the one that you'll adopt this, I'll bring it to you as a short form. I'll include what we've changed tonight, plus the 2.7, which is our interstate, and then VML-VACO High Growth Coalition, which generally covers the rest of what's on your long form.
Okay.
Yep. Let me just make an argument for adding one other thing to that short form, at the risk of thinking we're going to get back
to the long form.
But that is, there are several items of emphasis for state funding that are listed in individual items. And I think maybe highlighting a particular interest for the county in some areas as one item, such as restoring education funding. I'd like to see stormwater local assistance funding, because we've gotten several millions of dollars out of that included in that. The tourism funding for the state, but just a handful of items that would not necessarily be on every locality's list, but would reflect some budgetary priorities that we might have.
That'll help.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put all the James City County specific funding ones together into one rather than separate them out.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other? Okay,
I have what I need. I'll bring it to you next meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we are down to the last item, which is building safety and security. And it's John Ripley and Grace Boone here.
Yes, they are.
All right.
Happily so.
Happily so.
Okay. We have a chair for you right over here on the show.
She's like, heck, I was almost over there.
All right. So no password on this. Does anybody know the password for the computer?
I don't know.
Jason?
Oops.
Timed out.
Timed out.
Security.
Now you're on camera.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
And Mr. Chair, members of the board, as they're getting started, I did bring this to you just so you have an update of what we've been doing the past several months. Joanna has led sort of a team of employees looking at different buildings and following up on some information we've had from years past. And we are going to make some safety improvements, but I wanted to at least talk through the process and where we are and sort of how we see things going forward and give you the opportunity to ask questions and clarify that. So if the technology will return, we'll turn it over to Grace and Joanna to lead us through it.
Good evening. I just want to introduce myself. I've not been before the work session before. I'm Joanna Ripley, the Assistant Director of General Services, and I brought my committee fellow member, Michelle Tutan from the Fire Department. Today, I'd like to start out with just some brief information about the committee. We were appointed in June of this year, and the committee is an array of county employees from building safety and permits, emergency management, facilities management, risk management, fire, general services, human resources, information resource management, and police. So we had a really good cross-section of folks. to help us through this process. The presentation today includes the committee's process relative to the assigned tasks and deliverables, the preferences and survey results from county employees, the criteria the committee used to make its determinations, review of the committee recommended priority buildings, review of the committee recommended building security enhancements, the security funding recommendations, and then a review of the police and fire calls for service data for county facilities. This next slide shows the committee process from phase 1 to phase 3. The tasks assigned to the committee were to review what the police security assessments recommended last year, determine if there are any changes in any of the building conditions from last year to present, identify what security protocols have already been implemented, consider implementing recommendations and obtain associated costs, obtain employee suggestions or recommendations, and provide regular updates to county administration. The results from the tasks that were assigned include development of priority building criteria, development of a priority building list, obtaining costs associated with security enhancements, identifying funding opportunities for security, development of active threat training, which is a program that was developed by our police and fire departments. Through the end of September, approximately 46% of county employees have attended the training. Implement new hire training that includes the active threat training, which is actually, it consists of 2 courses, Stop the Bleed and Active Threat Defense. And they're offered quarterly to employees that are both new and anyone that wants a refresher. We developed a employee survey. The employee survey included 3 open-ended questions and 14 weighted questions. We developed recommendations, and the committee based all of the analysis on the relating data available for those recommendations. The last phase in the committee process included making recommendations to the executive leadership team. On September 12th of this year, the committee presented a review of the employee survey data and results, a request to the leadership team to review and approve proposed facility renovations, a request to establish a building liaison program, a request that the leadership team review and approve the department level all hazards emergency action plans, and a recommendation to implement a permanent employee safety and security committee. This graphic here is the employee survey and security preferences. The employee security preferences come directly from the open-ended questions. The questions were, in order to enhance safety and security, what are some changes you'd like to see in your facility? In order to enhance safety and security, what are some changes you would like to see to policies, procedures, and protocols? And lastly, are there any other thoughts or suggestions you have about safety and security? Roughly 20% of the county staff responded to the survey. To analyze the data comparatively, all the employee requests in response to the open-ended questions were put into categories, and the results are that the vast majority of county staff want more training for all types of emergencies. In addition, staff would like additional swipe card, access to employee-only areas, cameras installed in public areas, and some separation between the front desk staff and public, windows that open and close for additional egress, and additional parking lot lighting. This is the employee survey questions and responses to the 14 weighted questions. The county has many positives to focus on, as we scored highly on employees knowing how to perform their work in a safe manner, that their concerns that they may have would be made a priority by management. Employees know who to report workplace hazards in their department. They know the necessary precautions related to their job, and they are comfortable voicing workplace health and safety concerns. However, we do have some areas that need attention, and the committee focused on those questions that garnered a score of less than 3.5. Many of the questions that scored 3.5 or less have been addressed through the committee developed all hazards emergency action plans, active threat training, and the expansion of training for new hires and refresher courses. Committee criteria. The committee utilized the following criteria to develop building priorities. The police security assessments, these assessments were done both inside and outside of the facilities and provide guidance regarding security enhancements for every county facility. The employee survey, the survey provided an opportunity for employees to let us know what security measures are important to them. Next, the committee asked 3 fundamental questions. Is the building or facility open to the public? Does the staff handle cash transactions? And is there a high probability that staff could potentially interact with an agitated staff or public? The committee recommendations priority building list. With the criteria in mind, the committee systematically went through the police security assessment reports and applied the remaining criteria. From that process, the buildings identified as priorities are Building F, Buildings A and E, Building B, the Satellite Office, Human Services Center, and the Recreation Center. The buildings are listed in priority order, and you will notice that the buildings A and E are grouped together, and that's because the committee felt that these buildings are very similar in both setup and needs and met the committee criteria identically. Committee recommendations for the priority building alterations. In Building F, the committee recommends the installation of a permanent wall in human resources where there is currently a cubicle wall. Add swipe card access to doors leading to employee areas in financial management, real estate, and human resources. Install locking handles on doors in conference rooms. Replace one window in the GIS office space that will open and close for egress. Remodel the front desk workspaces in human resources and real estate. Within Building A, install swipe card access on employee areas for planning and community development. In Building E, install swipe card access on the areas for stormwater, building safety and permits, and records management. Additionally, within both Buildings A and E, a redesign of the front desk areas. Inside the satellite office, the committee recommends installing a rear exit door for additional egress. The treasurer's office and commissioner's office located in Building B have many security measures in place. However, the committee recommends one enhancement, such as installing a rear exit door on the commissioner revenue side of the building for an additional egress. At the Human Services Center, similar to Building B, there are many security measures in place, but some enhancements would be beneficial, such as a redesign of the front desk workspace within both social services and Old Town Medical Center. Lastly, the committee recommended installation of an additional camera at the Recreation Center, and the camera has been installed and it is monitoring the parking near community rooms A through C and the skate park. Funding security recommendations. The committee evaluated the total costs and funding. The total costs for security enhancements within priority buildings range from $228,600 to $260,600. As part of the fiscal year 20 budget process, $50,000 in funding was approved for security enhancements. Some departments have utilized their existing budget to implement security measures, and staff has identified savings from fiscal year 19 and 20 that totals $130,100 that could be utilized for security. Lastly, staff is exploring grant opportunities, but the process could take up to 1 year. Calls for service. The calls for service at county facilities for fire, medical, and police emergencies is the final piece to the Building Safety and Security Committee supporting data. The report is provided by fire and police for each county facility, and it spans the previous 4 years. I removed the fire stations, fire administration, and the law enforcement center from the data because it skews the numbers. Committee members from both fire and police explained that often citizens will come to these locations and then contact 911. When this occurs, the 911 call is then logged as the incident happened at that location. Thus, it inflates the call activity for those sites. Once the data is sanitized, a clearer picture emerges to assist in the identification of priority buildings.
I'm sorry, was there any reason, if you explained it and I didn't hear it, I apologize, for the orange lines?
So the orange lines are the priority buildings, the current priority buildings, and then the blue lines are the remaining facilities that we have not had an opportunity to assess.
Okay.
Grace, can you go back to the previous?
Trying to get their previous.
Yeah. The question I had was, this includes police, fire, and from fire, it could be either fire response or EMS response. My question, I guess, was when I look at these from a security aspect, if you've got, like, for example, the Veterans Park or the
Rec Center. It could be a lot of EMS response from old guys having heart attacks or something like that. Then again, it could be, fights in the parking lot. Have you made any attempt to like, for example, I was concerned at Veterans Park. It would seem to me that Veterans Park was a very high response rate, and I have no idea whether that's mostly police or whether it's fire EMS or, I'm just sort of beg the question of why is the response so much higher at some of these locations than others? Okay.
Do you want to take that or do you want to?
Well, I can say with Veterans Park, some of what you're getting is traffic stops in the area, plus our park rangers that go around dealing with a lost cell phone or lost keys and things like that. Okay. So it generates a call for service.
Okay.
So that is likely, without having the stats right in front of me, that's likely what you're seeing with Veterans Park. The rec center, I would say, knowing a lot of the calls for service that I hear go out, I would say a lot of them are more police than EMS, but I would still say you have a high percentage of EMS calls as well.
Okay, all right. Just sort of curious. Yeah.
So without sorting out fire and EMS calls and separating them from law enforcement.
Okay.
And Mr. Eisenhower, we could spend some time doing that if there's value to do that.
I'm not sure there's any value to it. I mean, it just sort of struck me when I looked at the slide that it hit me a little odd. So,
Sure. Well, there could be value in it if you wanted to really get down to the nitty gritty of Veterans Park, and but. I mean,
let us see what we can do, and we'll provide that information to you and see if we need to talk about that some more.
Okay.
Okay.
So
the only other comment I'd like to make, if you can move back to the funding page, what we didn't want to do is to think we weren't moving forward. We have funding that we've identified that we can move forward with. I don't necessarily need any board action. I just didn't want you seeing these projects we're doing that weren't specifically budgeted and not make you aware that we had the funding out there from these other sources to do that. If you were to say, hey, well, that's not quite whatever the total amount is, you're right. If you gave it all today, it still takes some time to do it. So there's no value yet of giving us the $260,000 if that's what we need to do. We wanted to work through what we need and push on. As we get to a point of needing more money, we would come back. Because I also don't want to wait necessarily for a budget cycle for something that's security related that might make sense to go ahead and do today. So if you're comfortable with that, we're going to press on with many of these. We've done a few of them, and we've had incident concerns in areas. We've added some cameras and other things that were within our budgeted funds. So we've done some of those things already, but our intent is to move on and do some of these other improvements. And the most extensive really will be over here in the HR area, all the soft walls there having some reconfiguration that makes those real walls that aren't as easily to hop over or maybe push through.
And I know that just a comment on the some of the walls you may change. I know they're doing it in Virginia Beach and trying to do it in some of the other areas. Is set aside some active shooter area where employees know to go to room X, and it's bulletproof, and there are got all the products out there now that you can put up that are snapped together almost, that are bulletproof for employees to gather in as a safety room. Might not be able to get out; they're stuck in the middle somewhere. So this room, room X is set up just for this. So if something happens, everybody in that corridor would run to X until, help arrive. And then I'd almost like to look at too, as far as behind our dais, just a little spot right there is a bulletproof spot right there for the board members. And you wouldn't see it in the front, but it'd be one place right there that if we had to get out or something, if you had to get under something, you would have that. We have a pretty safe community, but you never know who's going to walk through the door.
I want that spot in front of my chair.
Yeah, you can have that one.
Mr. Chairman, we would take care of all of it.
Yeah, the chairman would be this year, and then vice chair the next. We'd have to flip the last one.
So thank you, first of all,
Yes,
for this. And I'm particularly glad to hear that you've addressed some of these, because when I see, 34 people answer a question about they weren't given a walkthrough for safety upon their onboarding, that's a concern. Right. And, to be fair, wasn't, it's just now sort of become, in the last few years, really become our reality. And so, but I'm glad to see you've addressed those. The window issue, I'm glad to see about that, because I went to the doctor recently and they had taken off the turn on, from all the windows. And I got to tell you, it just gave me major, I was like, oh, okay, I'm in here, this room by myself. If something happens out there, I can't wind this window. It was like I was in school and I couldn't get the window open myself. So, it's little stuff like that that don't think about when you take off the handle, but that it's really important, because it's a matter of life or death, possibly. I wondered how do employees feel empowered that if they're not feeling safe to call 911? Have we ever said, oh, wait, go to talk to your supervisor, blah, 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 or do we empower an employee that is not feeling safe, that you make that call right then? How do we handle that kind of thing?
So I can say with the recent training that we've conducted, we are telling them, call 911, get us en route. If you need to cancel us, great, that's fine, no problem. But if there's a delay in the call, then there's a delay in the response if you really do need us. So we are telling them, if you feel that threat, to yes, please call 911. Go get somebody, but have 911 be your first go-to.
Okay.
So that's what we're doing in the training now.
I appreciate that. And I probably should have remembered that from the training that I went with you not very long ago. The only thing that sticks out to me is you teaching me how to stop a bleed inside somebody. But I surprised myself, and I could probably do it. The only other thing that I was going to say is that I think we need to give some thought about events that we have here other than our board meeting. Last week there was a candidate forum here, and I know that it was sponsored by the League of Women Voters and I believe the Alliance, and I'm sure extra cost and that type of thing, it's hard for organizations to come up with, but it's a different political climate than it was, and not just. But I think we really have to give some thought about when we're hosting events in our county buildings, what do we want to do for security for the attendees and for our staff? If we're putting our staff into a vulnerable position because of something that we're hosting, then I think we need to think about that and have a policy or something, or maybe not a policy, but a practice of how those things are handled. So, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. I think we've got down to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Will we get an update as the improvements?
We could bring things forward from time to time and tell you what we've done, and if you made those updates, be happy to do that.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all. Board requests and directives.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Good.
I'm good.
can't remember what they were.
So she could.
I'm good then. Okay. So I'll take a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on November 12th, 2019 for a regular meeting.
Motion.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Stadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
I was waiting on you.
Okay.